Today I'm gonna paint a big old bug. Hi guys, Jonathan from Two Raven Studios. Welcome to my channel. I do painting videos, I do miniature reviews, so subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. Today what we're gonna do is paint Xixorax from Monsterpocalypse. At least I think that's how you say the name. It's part of the Savage Swarm. It's pretty much just a giant beetle monster. Normally when I paint miniatures, I have a plan as I go in. I kind of have a general idea. It can change as I paint, but I kind of generally know what I'm doing. I took a different approach with this miniature. I knew I wanted to have a bunch of different colors and look kind of like a beetle shell, how it reflects all different colors, but I wasn't 100% sure exactly how I was going to do it. So I just grabbed some paint, some inks with my airbrush, and I hopped right into it and played around. In the end, there's definitely things I would have done different, but this is how you learn and grow as a painter, so I just want to take you guys along with this process of painting it. So, like I said, we're going to be using the airbrush for the most part, so I'm going to grab my airbrush, grab some inks, and we're going to hop right into the painting. So I'm starting out with some contrast paint. We're going to work from light to dark here, so I'm using the Iandan yellow. So I want to start out with the yellow, and then we're going to work darker through some greens and blues. So I'm hitting all the high spots with this yellow color. If you've never used contrast paints to the airbrush, they flow very nicely. Next I want to darken things down, so I'm going to use Warp Lightning contrast paint to add some green into this. So I'm letting the yellow that I already put on be highlights and adding some green into the midtones, and I'm still leaving the darkest areas the white primer. You can kind of see I used a zenithal highlight on the primer. I primed it black and then used white ink. So we're using that to help us here to add some shadows as we add these different colors. Next in, we're going to use Talisar Blue, and I'm going to hit the shadows with this. So you can see I'm taking a low angle and adding some dark spots in here. So I'm kind of going for a two-tone. The more parts of the shell, I'm going to do a different color, and the more parts that are more like underneath for the body are being this green, blue, yellow combination. What I want to do here is bring some brightness back into the body, so I'm actually going back to the yellow color and just kind of re-highlighting everything to make it a little bit brighter. You can see how it pops a little bit more after I go over it. So with Deep Violet ink, I'm actually going to start by adding some further shadows. So where the blue was, I'm just going to add a little bit more color. I want it to look a little bit iridescent when I'm finished, so I want to have a lot of different colors in here. We're adding more of the deep violet into the dark areas. And now with Deep Violet, I'm going to go onto the shell parts. So I'm going to be very selective here. I don't want to cover a lot of it. I just want to cover parts of it because I want to leave that primer available for some other colors so they stand through brightly as well. Again, with this Deep Violet ink, we're just moving around and picking out certain areas of the shell to paint while leaving other areas white. Now with purple ink, I am going to darken down the shell further. So as I move around, you can see I'm still leaving some of the areas white. I'm darkening down some of the areas. It was at this point that I felt it was starting to look too much like the Hulk with this purple and green combination, so I want to do something about that, but for now I'm just going to continue on with what I'm doing. Next I took some turquoise deep ink and went over the parts of the shell that I have left the primer from the previous steps. And you can kind of see this gives us a little bit of that iridescent look to the shell, because now we're not just purples, we're adding some blues in there. Starting to look a little less like the Hulk, but still a little bit too much like the Incredible Hulk for my liking. And I just let the overspray hit the wings on the back, and now I'm going in with some white ink and adding some highlights to it. Kind of gives it a little bit of a cool, different look with all those other colors modeled on there with the white highlights. I want to punch up the color, so I just took some fluorescent inks, and now I'm trying to going over areas with a similar color of fluorescent. So the blues on the shell, that turquoise ink I used earlier, I'm going over with fluorescent blue inks. You guys probably know I normally use the Green Stuff World fluorescents, but this was closer at hand, so I just grabbed what was close to my station. Now I'm going to go over some of the other parts with the other fluorescent colors. So we're going over the fluorescent yellows here with fluorescent yellow, just helping it pop up a little bit, make it a little bit brighter. And now with fluorescent green, we're doing the same thing, just going over the green colors with the fluorescent green, making them a little bit brighter. Fluorescent inks are very transparent, so we're just kind of adding filters on top of what we already done. Now to try to make it look a little bit less like the Hulk and a little bit more iridescent, I grabbed some Flesh Tear Red contrast, and I'm going to go over both the shell and the body with this, just kind of add some color variation and again, make it look that iridescent beetle type look. I'm really happy with how this kind of changed the overall look. And now you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm using holographic color shift paint from Green Stuff World, and I'm going from very far away, just a nice light dusting. If I were to do this again, I would have done this as the last step instead of doing it now, but when you don't have a plan going in, sometimes stuff like that happens. So just to show you what this paint looks like, it's a very kind of hologram looking paint. Now I'm going in with the brush to add some highlights, so I'm starting with Arcane Blue from P3, and we're just going to highlight all the shell parts with this. So I'm going along all the sharp edges and just adding some edge highlights here and there. You can see I'm using the side of the brush as I go along sharp edges to get a nice fine line. The reason I picked the blue here is because there's some blue within the purple and reds that we have, and I just figured this is a nice bright color to give us a little bit of definition. Next up, I'm going to use some underbelly blue, again from P3. This is a very light bluish color. It's like almost white, but there's a little bit of blue in it. And we're just going to further those highlights. You can see the sharpest edges, I'm just adding a little bit to what I did in the last step. I don't want to cover everything up I did in the last step, I just want to add a little bit more. You can also add some glints of reflection here and there if you want. I tried it a little bit, not fully happy with it, but again, this was an experiment. Now with some pure white, I use this Art brand white, but you can use any white you want. I'm just going over the wings and just adding some highlights to them. You can kind of see I'm just dotting along and along the sharper edges, running the brush. Kind of using the modeled airbrush I did earlier as my guide of where I put the highlights. And now we're going to highlight the underbody, the greenish color, and we're going to use Worm Green from P3. Again, we're just going along all the sharp edges, doing some quick edge highlighting just to bring out the detail a little bit. I was tempted to use some different colors as the color shift on the miniature, but in the end I decided just to use the one color. And now just to further those highlights like we did on the other part, we're going to use Cygnus Yellow. Again, just pump up the highlights a little bit and hit the raised edges. I'm much happier with how the shell came out than with the green parts, but again, this was an experiment and just playing around to see what I could do. And now for the eye, I decided I was going to make it glowing like an orange-yellow color, so I'm starting with Inferno Orange and just painting in the eye. Next up, I'm adding in some Heartfire, and you can kind of see I'm dotting it in along like a center line as dots. I don't want this to be like a solid eye, I want it to kind of have a little bit of bugginess look to it, so I'm trying to dot to create this kind of glow, like toxic bug feel. Then I added some white into the Heartfire and repeat it, just dotting along. And then I just took some pure white and furthered that. So I'm just adding successfully more white into this mix, dotting as I go. And then I use fluorescent yellow from Green Stuff World just to make the eyes glow a little bit more. And after that, we're done. You can kind of see as it rotates, you can see the little bit of a sparkle it has from the holographic paint lightly dusted on it. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I would have done things a little bit different. I think I kind of went back and forth too much with the colors than I would have if I just started out. Maybe I would have started out with fluorescence instead of the contrast. But with the experimentation, I think I got a pretty good result. So I hope you guys found that useful. If you did, I'd appreciate a like. If you'd like to see me paint more Monsterpocalypse stuff, let me know in the comments below. I definitely have a few other pieces that I could paint that need to be painted, and it's definitely a fun game if you guys have not tried it out. Next week, we're going to have some Crisis Protocol content. I'm going to be reviewing the construction site, and then I'm also going to be painting it. So look forward to the review on Tuesday and the painting video next Friday. But until then, keep on gaming and paint your minis.